August 8th, 1998, the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi suffered an urban bomb blast by a car bomb. At the time, Frank and I were both working at Nairobi Hospital teaching an emergency medicine course.
Well over 1,000 people were injured and required emergent treatment in the several emergency departments around the embassy.
We saw approximately 400 to 450 patients. The numbers of patients admitted, there were 73 admitted to the hospital overnight. And from the accident and emergency department, approximately 11 patients were taken emergently to the operating suites.
The patients that arrived at Nairobi Hospital following the blast were the walking wounded. Essentially, there was several lacerations. There were some patients with impressive eye injuries. Most of the more impressive crush injuries that required some extrication were delayed on their arrival, and that they arrived in a large, dense group. We had maybe 8 or 9 critical patients that arrived approximately an hour and 20 minutes into the event.
Nairobi Hospital did have a disaster plan. However, due to the sheer number of patients that showed up immediately and the fact that the people primarily who were familiar with the plan weren't available on scene immediately, it did not take effect. A basic form of the disaster plan was instituted about an hour or two into the incident.
One of the things, in retrospect, that could have been done better is essentially allocation of the physical space and how within that the patients were going to be most efficiently cared for.
Along with that was crowd control. Many of the security and crowd control personnel, because of the proximity to the bomb blast, I think were allocated towards the center of town, allowing all the injured patients to basically just completely flood the emergency department.
Some supplies were not allocated as efficiently as they could have been either. Again, the first wave of walking wounded tended to exhaust almost all of the bandages and tape and things like this, such that when patients arrived during the next hour, they could have used that. More so, we didn't have quite the amount of supplies. There was some delay in restocking from Central Supply. The internal communication at the hospital during the disaster was actually one of the better things that occurred during the disaster. There early on was talk amongst the main administrator of the hospital, the main organizer of the emergency medical services, and the handful of surgical subspecialists that showed up early on to take care of their patients. And this did allow for identification of the key issues that needed to be addressed in terms of delivering care during the disaster. There was a formal debriefing for the staff that followed approximately 3 days after the event. Several people were obviously very impacted emotionally by the events that they saw and by the trauma that they witnessed. I think a lot of people were able to come to some kind of closure after the event. And so it took about 2 or 3 hours, but I think everyone thought that it was extremely useful.